Real quiet start so far. Give it a few more minutes. It's the thing that lets me put links in the chat. There it is. So if you can add yourselves, that would be great. I'll just give it a few more minutes before we kick off. If you haven't added yourself to the notes, just go ahead and do that. The link is in the chat. Okay, I think we're far enough into the hour that we can kick off. I guess I'm chairing today. Lucky me. So usually in these meetings, we like to start off with new faces. Is there anybody who feels like they're a new face or a returning face and would like to introduce themselves?
I've been here for a while. I'm a security foundation security researcher.
Welcome back, Jonathan.
Hey all, my name is Radoslav Dimitrov, and I'm working at VMware at the open source supply chain team. I'm a maintainer of GoToF, and yeah, that's it.
Hello, I'm Jack. I joined quite a while ago, so this is my first meeting in a while. Yeah, I'm mostly here to catch up on things. I know that the attestations are moving along, and I just want to catch up on that. The kind of ecosystem I'm most familiar with is Nix packages, and then as an kind of extension of that, that reaches out to a lot of the other ecosystems like, Rust, Go, JavaScript, all that. But yeah, that's me.
Oh, welcome. All right. So the first item on the agenda is to note that our next report to TAC is going to be on April 18th. So in roughly 2 weeks. Last time I was there, I got caught unawares that was coming. So I'm a little scarred by the experience. I'm not necessarily last time, maybe the time before that. But anyway, at some point, we got caught off guard. So I'm definitely keen for folks to share anything they think that the TAC should know about. So for those who don't know or don't sort of pay attention to TAC, it's the Technical Advisory Committee, sort of the community, partially community elected group who oversee the working groups. And they ask working groups to report to them every few months as to what they're up to, where they're headed, and what they need help with. So I wanted to note that that's coming up. If folks have ideas or thoughts, not necessarily here today, but if you think of something that we ought to talk about, then definitely pop it in the channel as well. And I'll throw it open to the floor. No burning needs. Cool. Well, if you think of anything, let us know in the Slack channel. The next one is pretty much going to be the Jacques show, I'm afraid. The next one on the agenda is NPM publish attestation. So let me open that and share the tab. I guess I can't really do that with Zoom. Share screen, the one that's in bright green, Jacques. There we go. Okay, so what's interesting to me is that some NPM folks have gone ahead with the thing we've talked about in the past, which is producing attestations of a publication event. You know, in RubyGems, we think of this as a push, and I think in some other ecosystems it's called push, but in NPM it's called publish. As you can see, it's very simple, and there's nothing sort of like specifically NPM sort of hard coded to it. They're using package URLs to identify the packages, which is nice. And I had a chance to talk to some NPM folks coincidentally in another call about SigStore. And they were open to the idea that at some point, if we adopted some format or attestation for this kind of event, they'd be fine with migrating. The reason I bring that up is that in the past, we have talked about coming out with a common schema for events such as pushing, yanking, change of owners, you know, owner added, owner removed, change of owner email address. Yeah, basically things that a log monitor would be interested in to give them some sense that something security critical or sensitive has occurred, and that they should update their risk model for that package. Any thoughts on this, or anybody who feels they can give more context?
Hello, Jacques.
Hey.
The format is clear, but I do wonder, how do you acquire those attestations? Is it something just like NPM, something which will generate those for you, or how it's going to work for now?
That's a good question. My understanding was that they are publishing them to Recall, so into SigStore's transparency log as one thing, but they're also providing essentially extracts on NPM itself. I haven't looked into the code of how they create and what's the word I'm looking for? Create and consume these. But my understanding is that at least on the consumption side, they're going to a file that NPM distributes as the first resort, rather than going to Recore directly, although I think they provide an option to go to Recore if you're sufficiently paranoid, which is something we've mooted in RubyGems as well. When we talked about SigStore signing, is that we would want to have stuff that's side by side with the actual gem file itself, the .gem file, I should be clear. Just because going to Recore all the time will be bad for Recore, and also because we're doing it as a file that sits next to the original .gem, plays very nicely with CDN support. Jack, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, this might be a bit too close to implementation for a question, but is this attestation something that is generated by the NPM kind of like backend or servers rather than
that's my understanding.
Machine? Got it.
My understanding is that it's being produced by the NPM backend or registry, which sort of makes sense. Like, this is not the same as what we usually talk about when we say signature. When we say signature, what I like to sort of the thing I'm trying to make happen is authorial attestation, right? An attestation of authorship is really what we mean when we say signature. That I proclaim that I am the author of this package or an author of this package. Whereas this one is the registry itself saying I received a package under these conditions. The only thing I guess I would change about it is, well, I was about to say I would add a timestamp, but that's actually not necessary in Recall because it's already a timestamping authority. So you have a pretty good idea of when things happened. But there might be something said for a timestamp of like, from the registry's point of view, what the registry interpreted the time to be. So that you can, check for drift or things like that. I haven't really looked at this repo very much. Looks like publish is the first one they've done, and I guess the README is a little bit terse. But I think it's a work in progress.
And Jack, there was mention. It's can you open the example one again?
Yeah.
There's a mentioned. It's like conforms to in-toto attestation spec. Do you have any insight what in-toto is and who's behind this?
Yeah, so in-toto is a project that originally came out of New York University. It's a number of things, actually. The original sort of gist for in-toto was that you would describe your supply, like your build process was the main focus of it, in a sort of a generic format, and then provide signatures for each step of that chain to establish, all the things that you did and all the inputs you took and all the outputs you produced. And the idea was that somebody could use that to trust that you actually performed the builds that you promised. And as part of that, there is a more generic concept of a statement, which is like a relatively open-ended format or envelope, which people are using. They're sort of like building on top of that to define attestations such as a publish. But it's a little hard to get your head around at first. Like it's fairly generic in its design, or it's been made more generic as time has gone on, with the introduction of this attestation spec concept. I see chat lighting up. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Those are the links. It's worth looking at. I haven't sort of prioritized it in my own work, in the sense that I was sort of in a wait and see position to see how it expanded. I think the use of the statement concept is probably going to be pretty widespread, but it's early days. I don't know if that really answers your question.
I'm just wondering who's behind this, or actually better question is who is maintaining this today. But looking at the homepage, it's also related to Linux Foundation and all this stuff.
Yeah,
it seems like it's not like a random specification found on the web, but yeah.
No, it's pretty worked out. Like they've done a pretty good job. It looks like it's been adopted into the LF at some point. Yeah, in-toto is good. I see it as part of, like, you might think of it as the overall long-term solution. I'm pretty sure that Salsa attestations are also in-toto attestations. So, they are. Yeah. Okay. So it's sort of like being used as a base format. I'm going to butcher your name, which I understand happens. People do it to me too. Either Jussi or Yussi.
Yeah, it's Jussi.
Okay.
Yeah, I was about to pretty much mention the same things you said there in the end, that I think quite a few people are using some parts of the in-toto spec like these annotations, though this is kind of typical that what NPM is doing, that taking the attestation and just starting with that, because it does, I haven't done it myself, but it does look like fairly complicated setup if you want to actually do the whole in-toto process. And it does require like a fairly complex custom setup, but I agree that it would be probably beneficial in some cases.
It has the advantage that it's like a standard, and I'm now wondering whether Recall has support for it. That's cosine, but I vaguely remember that the Recall transparency log has support for in-toto attestations, but maybe I'm just like,
yeah, not
sure.
to get too into the weeds, but typically like proper in toto support will be more for tooling. So any kind of tooling that you're using during the build process can integrate with in toto. In this case, we're just talking about the statements, which were just a good format that others have adopted.
Yeah, like it's pretty simple to extend, right? Like you have this part, which is sort of the prelude that you have to include, but the extension point is being able to do this. And then, you know, so I have a predicate type, and then once you define the predicate type, you can sort of set your fields. And broadly speaking, like these three would be enough, right? Like you would interpret name locally within the context of the software repo and registry repo. You know, everybody's got the terminology, and versions pretty widely agreed to be a string, I guess. Jonathan.
I'm curious why this is published in such a way that it was NPM specific instead of being generic for all Perls, or any package that has a Perl or can be defined as a Perl.
I'm not sure I caught the gist of the question. You're a little muffled.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
A little better, but it's still quite muffled.
There's something up with the software in the Apple AirPods that is particularly bad recently. I don't know what's up. Anyways, the question that I'm asking is, why is this NPM specific? It looks like it could be used generically for any, yay. I'm wondering, like, this looks like it could be generically applied to any package that publishes a project that is Perl spec compliant, right? Not just NPM. So Maven, Gradle, well, Maven, Gradle is under the Maven ecosystem. You know, any of those other spaces. So why is this NPM specific, out of curiosity?
Sure. The simple reason is that they wanted to go ahead with it without having to wait to agree to a standard.
Fair.
Yeah, very fair. But the other thing too is that, you know, at least in casual conversation and not sort of like having formally agreed to anything, they were open to the idea when I spoke to NPM folks in the Sigstore call, to the idea that, like, if we adopted this or, you know, adopted some evolution of this, then they would be fine with migrating to a shared schema.
Right. Okay, interesting. Because I'm thinking, like, and also trying to understand, is this something that is published by NPM to the central repository? Or is it something that you run a GitHub action to say, hey, I did a publish from this action?
My understanding is that it's published by the registry. Which is the important thing, right? Like it's different from an attestation that a build occurred, which is sort of what Salsa focuses on.
Yeah.
It's different from an attestation that I am the author, which is what we usually mean anecdotally, sort of casually when we say sign. This is the registry saying, I received the package with these characteristics, and recording that event.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so then this is something that other packaging ecosystems like, you know, Maven or Ruby or whatever could go and implement themselves. Okay, I understand. Okay, but this is not on the publisher side. This is not on the publisher side. This is on the publish receiver side.
Yeah, it's on the registry or repository side, which is something we talked about early on in this group. Was, as I said, sort of like registries or repositories publishing events to the transparency log that were security sensitive, that they had privileged access to. And the idea is that you sort of, my slogan that I try to use is making the attacker move in the open. So as these events occurred, they put into a public log that is separate from the repository. So there's no easy way for an attacker to go back and delete the evidence that they performed those actions. Jack, I see your hand up next.
Yeah, so just looking at this data structure, I'm not sure how much benefit I'm really getting, because just based off the Perl, I know it's to the upstream NPM, like the real NPM, not like my own registry. I know the package name and I know the version. I think what I would want to see in here to make it a lot more useful is I would want to know kind of who was publishing, or have some kind of signature saying this is the person or bot or whatever that did the publish for that event. And I would also want to know kind of where the source is, like what's the PURL for where the code came from, if it's like an open source project. Because one of the things I've been really questioning a lot looking at Perls and vulnerability scanning like this, is it ODV or OVD? But it's like a Perl based vulnerability database. What's really bugging me is how do I map these to like a common location? So I guess we've got, in this case, npm scope package foo, but maybe that has a origin of, GitHub, some organization, some repo name, and that can have a parallel of that location. So yeah, like an origin of where the code was might be quite handy.
So I can actually talk about this. The idea is that this one just talks about the push event, the publish event. There are other attestations that talk about that capture the authorship, right, which is like code signing. And that would also be in the transparency log. And then there's another event which npm intend to emit, which is the salsa build provenance. So that if you are using a service that has the OIDC to token flow, that would be able to tie it to the commit, right? So if you were running on GitHub Actions or BuildKite, or I think GitLab have it now as well, the idea is that the build that's happening inside one of those systems is given a token by the build service that can be exchanged for a push token in the registry or repository service. And when it does so, it includes information about the commit and the person who triggered the build. So that information gets captured in the build provenance. So the idea is that when you want to assemble this data, you assemble it from the collection of attestations rather than like one mega attestation that does everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just thinking. So I've got a handful of attestations. I guess the build is saying it's this commit, and then the resulting artifact is package npm scope, blah blah blah. But I wouldn't necessarily be able to work my way back the other direction, is what I was thinking. So
sorry,
like,
which is the other direction? I don't quite follow.
so I can go from the build attestation to then find the publish attestation, but I can't take the publish attestation and work out where that build attestation was quite as easily. I guess
I'm not sure.
Transparency log for this Perl again.
Yes, but also like I believe npm's intention, and I believe most ecosystems would do something similar, is to have extracts from the log as files that are predictably named, so that you can have the file of the .gem or the the package object, whatever it is in your ecosystem, and you would have .gem.att for attestations, so that you would have one or several files depending on the exact scheme to download. That would include all the relevant information for that particular package. So if you had the package name, you could derive everything else pretty easily.
Okay.
Jonathan, did you have a follow-up question, or is that an old hand? I don't know if you're talking, but if you are, you're muted. It's a mystery. Okay. Are there any more sort of like questions? This is a good conversation, I think. Going once, going twice.
The only other thing, if I did have to like bring something up, would be with say images like containers, or with GitHub Actions and stuff like that. We
Mhm.
quite like to do a tag plus a commit hash or a digest hash or whatever. But in the case of these predicate formats, we mostly just refer to the version. I guess that's probably fine. These things aren't going to change particularly often, but just something that came to mind.
I saw the same thing and I thought the same thing. I would be much happier if it was pinned to a commit rather than to a tree. That's something that could be raised in a standardization process. Definitely, I think.
Best way to record all this stuff is probably to open an issue.
Yes.
In the short term, long term, bring it up. Short term, create an issue.
Yeah, the attestation issue, like the attestation repository, there's the word I was looking for, on GitHub has issues enabled, so it would be possible to raise it there, I think. And
I'll do that sometime today.
cool. Any more questions about attestations and published in NPM and so on? No? Okay. So the next one, also me, a question that was asked by Madison Oliver in the Slack channel on behalf of folks from Erlang was, what organization or who are people going to for CVE numbers? You know, the CVE numbering authority or CNA. That one I know is sometimes a storied question. But I was curious if we could gather any sort of answers or suggestions that we could feed back.
I can repeat my answer. I already sent to the Slack. There is OpenWall source software security list. I used to request CVs in before. I think it's managed by some Red Hat folks, or at least was at the time I was requesting those for some Ruby libraries. So, so just about to send out the report, and they just replied, use the CV and the number for this one. So, relatively simple process, but it was like 8 years ago. I used it for the last time, but I checked recently before I replied, and it's still working well. So people are requesting CVs in there.
Oh,
Is it OpenWall?
Yeah, OpenWall.
Oh, I didn't realize that was that. Okay, cool. It's another CNA that I hadn't used or didn't know about.
cool. If you get a chance, Joseph, can you drop a link into the notes? The other one I've heard people using is GitHub to have their CNA. I've heard some people, when they make reports through GitHub security advisories, are asking for a CVE number to be issued.
Yeah, so GitHub is a very convenient system for just hitting, like if you're using GitHub Security Advisory, you can very easily just hit a button and say, hey, please give me a CVE number, and they will issue one for you. The one that I use them when I can, they're only willing to issue a CVE number if the maintainer has requested the CVE number, and a lot of maintainers don't understand the CVE process. So
right.
I also tend to fall back on using SNCC because they're really convenient to work with. I can pull them into an existing GHSA and say, hey, this is the vulnerability, and they will be pretty proactive about, you know, giving me a CVE number for that. So, but I prefer to publish my disclosures using GHSAs because SNCC's data is private, or sorry, SNCC data is corporate, and so if you provide them all the information, they will put it in their database, but then it ends up in a structured format that you have to have a license for, versus GitHub's database is Creative Commons.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't know about SNCC doing that. But yeah, that makes sense that you would prefer GitHub when you could. You see?
Yeah, just another vote for GitHub from a maintainer perspective. That was at least very painless as far as these things go. It just kind of happens without me doing much anything.
So we like it. All right, I think we've tapped that one out. Unless anyone else has been concealing a CNA that they know about and like. And now we move to any other business, which is pretty much what it sounds like. If folks have some issue that they're burning to discuss, we leave this spot open towards the end of the meeting.
I haven't.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm thrilled to have start seeing that there is now some feet underneath some work that I did prior to my departing Gradle, which is involving a dependency extractor plugin that will sit underneath a Gradle build. Okay, so high level, first problem. Gradle builds, unlike Maven or NPM, most of the time you can kind of figure out what a build set of versions will be just by looking statically at a file. You know, you can look at a requirements file or a setup.py that's not too complicated and kind of discern what versions a project depends upon. And that's not possible for Gradle because it's a fully Turing complete build. And so as a result, NPM or GitHub never tried to create a dependency graph for Gradle. And so it is finally being worked on by the Gradle team to add support that when you're running a Gradle build within a GitHub action, the build will automatically have the set of dependencies that are resolved or will be resolved within the build get extracted and sent up to GitHub's dependency API, which will mean that the other thing is that API will be something that anybody can pull from a repository. I think. Hope it's not just maintainers. But basically, it'll be something that you can say, hey, what are the set of dependencies this repository is depending upon, and you can get that list. So that work is proceeding again. It was stopped for about a year and change, and so I'm glad to see that moving again.
That's exciting. Yeah, that's always been a tricky thing with Gradle.
Sterling, did I miss anything?
No, I think it's hey again. Haven't talked to you in a while.
I haven't chatted with you in a while either. Nice to hear your voice.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to mention is I think next week there is there's going to be a conference and we have somebody presenting there, kind of giving an update on SIG-Store support for Java for Gradle. So right now we have the SIG-Store Gradle plugin is able to publish SIG-Store metadata, but currently Gradle doesn't do anything with that, so there's no verification part. But yeah, there'll be someone talking next week about that.
That's really cool. If you get a chance, Sterling, can you drop a link into the notes?
Sure, I'll find it.
Yeah, that's exciting to see the progress. It's all sort of coming together. Any other business that folks had?
I have a drum that I'm going to keep on beating.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I have been pretty concerned about is that, in my experience, I think I will repeat ad nauseum something that a line that I have said before. Repository artifact servers are not usually something that a company is selling. It is usually something that a company is hosting out of the goodwill of their heart. As such, because it is not a sold product, there is never a requirement by a company that is purchasing that product to require a security audit of that product before consuming it. As a result, most of the artifact servers, as far as I'm aware, on the industry have never had a security audit done by an external pen test firm. My concern is that's not a great state of the supply chain of the majority of the software in the world is coming from untested infrastructure that's never been audited for security. Has there been any more discussions about trying to encourage or push forward an initiative or even get visibility into how prevalent actually getting pen testing done against artifact servers that are used to supply the industry software has actually happened?
I'm going to jump in front of Jack because I'm rude. I hope that's okay, Jack.
Yes,
And do an Uno reverse card, which is, do you know any organizations with millions of dollars and a mission to spend money on improving security that might be able to
Yes,
help?
I do, but their budget's already set for the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as much. Narrowly, at least at Shopify, we donated $1 million over 4 years to RubyGems, or Ruby Central, really, who are the people behind RubyGems.org, and they've also managed to raise funding from the German government. We don't set their agenda, how they spend that money. We did ask them to focus on security. And
Yep.
there's a lot of work being done, but I haven't seen an audit being commissioned at this time. So that's the narrow answer I can give. Did I miss anything, Joseph?
Not really. I think this topic was already raised before.
I
And I
have
think
raised
also
this one a couple of times.
that's
Sorry,
never
Ruby.
actually too much being raised on this topic, right? But I think also one of the answers at the time was there are the public programs on HackerOne and all the stuff, which in theory anyone can do the audit, right? The code is open, at least on our
No, you
side.
can't perform an audit. If a
I mean,
company puts
everyone, and
software,
there's
if
some
you
kind of motivation for that's like hackers would like to
no, it's
find
not
problems.
that. There are federal laws that prevent researchers from performing audits against software and services that are hosted without permission. So unless the company has put forward a policy that says we allow audits from external researchers, it is hacking and it is unauthorized access under the United States has a federal law called CFAA, which is this Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And if you access a system without permission, you are violating federal law within the United States.
There is
And
no need to
so,
actually, I'm getting your point. I
yeah,
think it works a little different in Europe in here, but anyway, you can even run your own instance of RubyGems locally really easily, right? You don't need to actually
right.
test the real production version, but you can
Right.
spin up custom one for testing. But clearly that's not real audit, right? But there are
Yeah.
some motivation programs to at least get, we are getting some reports, but not really often these days. But I think to answer your question, at least from RubyGem side, no, there was no effort for now to call for real audit on a repo software.
Jacques, what would the process be under which part of me is tempted to start like beating this drum within the OpenSSF to say, okay, like clearly I've been beating this drum for, over a year now. Can we get, maybe I can talk to Alpha Omega and say like, hey, Alpha Omega, like we're looking at software, but like, do we also consider repositories in scope? Can we commission audits
Infrastructure.
and infrastructure audits of major artifact servers that can't come up with an attestation that they, have had a pen test within the past 2 years? Like, I presume that, I would guess, given GitHub's security stance in the past, they've probably done an audit. But especially because NPM was acquired, right? They were bought by GitHub. I presume there was an audit done at that point. Yeah, so like, hey, have you had an audit? If not, here's a bunch of money. We're gonna hire a company and we're gonna audit you, yada yada yada.
Yeah. As I said, with RubyGems, the place to go would be Ruby Central, which is the sort of the governing organization that oversees development and manages the funding. To suggest it, the thing is that in the agreement that Shopify made, we basically promised not to interfere with decisions. Right. So it would be difficult for me to go, and it would be difficult for me to go and like bang the drum, because it'd be like, well, is that interference?
Yeah. That's fair. All right. Anybody have any other clever ideas around this problem? And
I see Jack has his hand up.
Yeah, go for it. I'm on my phone, so I can't see hands raised. Sorry.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Jack. Sorry for
I got a bit distracted by your cat trying to climb up the wall.
Oh, adorable. That one's Chai. He's adorable. Yeah, we have 3 black cats, and they're all wonderful additions to our family recently.
Yeah.
Nice. But so what you're talking about is more central registries like NPM and Ruby rather than like donated CDN stuff. Like, okay, I'm hosting my Arch Linux ISOs, and there's 30 universities and Fastly, etc., that are all also
I am
hosting
talking
it.
about an audit of the entire infrastructure involved in the dependency resolution supply chain for an artifact server, from publishing to serving the content, right? Is it possible to cache poison the CDN because of the configuration of the company or supplier that is hosting, like, because yeah, so it's not just about the software, it's about the entire interplay between the CDN and the artifact server software, right? Because cache poisoning between those two places, or HTTP request splitting between those two places, can maybe only be possible against the running instance, given the configuration that's present, that may not be possible if you're just looking at the software running locally on your machine.
Okay, got it. So even Golang would be in scope, because there's like that cache that's available by default that Google
Yes.
runs. Okay,
Yes.
interesting.
And any major artifact component, yeah. Yes, are there any artifact servers from the industry here currently that are willing to discuss like current initiatives that are going on in this space around, like, is there anybody in this space that is currently going through the process of getting an organization to get a pen test of their, or is, yeah, I mean, I don't want to call anybody out specifically, but I want to open the floor to see if anybody wants to speak up.
Might be tricky. We're lightly attended today. You might also ask in the Slack channel.
Yep.
I'm not sure about like public registries, but I wonder if JFrog have had anyone kind of audit their product.
I would believe that they, first off, I would be surprised if they didn't have some sort of ISO spec, because they're self-hosting for customers, and also they're selling their product, right? In my experience, the product that is sold to a customer is the product that gets audited, because there is due diligence that the security team can do as a part of the acquisition process to require that an audit is performed before purchasing is allowed to happen. And that is not something that happens when an artifact server, like an open source dependency server, is consumed, because that just comes implicitly and it's given away for free, right? So there's never a time where the security department can get in the way and say, wait, like, we are not going to accept this purchase to occur.
There's no purchasing department involvement.
Right, exactly.
There's no purchase happening, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we do see a lot of representation from folks at Sonatype usually, speaking with the Maven Central hat on. And yeah, a lot of customers also require audits as well. At a previous job, I worked for an enterprise vendor, and we actually had 2 series of audits. We had audits where we kept the results to ourselves, and audits where we gave the results to customers. I can't remember the logic behind why there were 2 different kinds of audit, but both of them were still like external firms banging away, finding interesting stuff.
Yeah, I would, I mean, yeah, I think that there's a struggle where, first off, if we were to commission external audits, we would still need to get permission from the organizations hosting these things, because, again, anti-hacking laws, and also no company is going to accept a contract to pen test a firm that is not accepting of that, right? They're not that's a brutal legal hurt. But that may not be a case if we can get a list of artifact servers that have, for example, vulnerability disclosure policies. I think I created a list of that. I started creating a list of artifact servers that had set forth permission for, like, you are allowed to hack us and we will not chase you with lawyers. And I think I have a CSV file that I created a while ago.
I think Python PyPI'd that we hadn't got around to an acceptable use policy for for rubygems.org, so it was mostly the implicit don't be a dick.
Yeah, I think that I remember that there was like here's a place to report, but it didn't explicitly carve out the and also we won't chase you with lawyers for reporting. Like the safe harbor, basically.
Right.
Google
Yeah.
have that for some servers and domains. I wonder if the Golang cache is in that list.
Oh, interesting. Given that's a Google domain. Yeah, let me go talk to Alpha Omega and see if there's. I mean, I don't think the budget for Alpha Omega is set, and so we could maybe consider that in scope for an audit.
Yeah, NPM, pretty much look after their own thing. They have corporate backing, which is nice.
Yes.
To a lesser extent, Maven Central, but definitely the ones that have run on a volunteer basis, like PyPI and RubyGems, would I suspect welcome it.
Yeah, and I think that like it's easy enough to go to an organization and say, hey, can you attest that you've had a pen test within the past year? Okay, we don't need to focus on you.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like in terms of throwing money at the problem.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, this gives me something to go chew on.
Right.
Yeah, thanks.
Happy to help. We have any other business that folks would like to discuss today? If not, we can have about 13 minutes back.
One quick one,
now.
Jack. And any news on packaging con?
I haven't heard anything about it lately. I haven't looked at the page for a little bit. But I don't think CFPs are open yet. I'm gonna just cheat and look at it and pretend I knew all along what this was.
For which one? Which conference?
There is, I will drop a link in for Packaging Con, which is a conference for software repository folks.
Okay.
And to my knowledge, any news?
I do know that the CFP for Open Source Summit EU is open, so I submitted a paper yesterday. What is Packaging Con? Who's hosting it, and where is it run out of? Because this is a new one.
It's only been done once in 21. This year it says in Berlin, Germany. I'm not sure who organizes it, but it had a pretty good turnout at the first one, like a very, very diverse showing up. So I plan to attend, and I'll lobby for other things as well, which I won't commit to in a recorded session. But yeah, I think it would be a good place for us, the Securing Software Repos group, to show up and give a presentation to basically say, this is the work we do, and here's what we hope that will be useful to you, and can you participate, so we can share knowledge. I might also sort of, when they open CFPs, try to put in a talk about the work we've done on RubyGems in the past year or two.
Sterling, do you know if this is a spin-off of it all of so GitHub back in 2018, 2019? No, 2019, maybe 2020, had a packaging summit where they brought together a bunch of the major artifact servers at a Microsoft office. And that was the first incarnation of, I think, this working group actually before. Is this
it might be? I don't know.
Yeah. Do you know if Gradle will be sending anybody? Not to call you out, Sterling, but do you know if Gradle will be sending anybody?
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
Since I haven't heard any more about it, I haven't beat any bushes for it.
All right. I will see. That seemed like a really interesting conversation and something that I'm passionate about, although I don't work for a package maintainer anymore. I do have a lot of passion in theory, so I might see if I can squirrel myself over there too. Plus, it's an excuse to go to Germany.
Well, there's sponsorship opportunities, they say. It says it's run by NumFocus, which is sort of a scientific Python community.
Okay, cool.
A lot of what they do. So I imagine there's folks involved there from maybe PyPI and Anaconda, that sort of folk.
Yep. I mean, as long as they're willing to accept that it's not just the Python ecosystem packaging, but the whole industry's packaging.
As I said, they had a great turnout in 21, and I
Perfect.
expect they will have a nice broad turnout.
What was this?
Um,
What was the size of the conference ish?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't go to the 2021. It conflicted with RubyConf that year.
Okay.
Got to pick your battles.
Yep. Yep. Flying is exhausting on the body.
Yeah, especially when you're a little bit taller than average. That tends to work against you.
I did a month of nonstop travel from Italy to Japan to home in Boston to San Francisco, like 3 days later to Florida to home to San Francisco to home within a month.
No.
And I slept for a week. Like I called my doctor and I'm like, I'm sleeping a lot. Is this normal? And they're like, give it another week. If you're still sleeping a lot, let us know. And then I was good. But like I was concerned. I'm like, I don't sleep this much normally.
I'm not a good adapter to time zones anymore.
Yeah.
I know people who bounce between time zones like a flea on crack, but I'm not one of those people.
No.
I'm an ordinary human.
Melatonin helps a lot.
Anyway, let's not go into the rabbit weeds of the travails of travel, because we could be here all day. I'm going to let you all go with 8 minutes to spare. Thanks everybody for coming today, and I look forward to seeing you all. The next meeting will be at the APAC friendly time, which for those of you in the US is 6 p.m. Eastern time.
Yes.
So we'll see who is able to attend then. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, Josh.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, all.